Good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to all of you on this webinar, Energy as a Service versus Energy Performance Contracting, how contract modeling can impact your sales strategy. My name is Bart de Volder from TNO, and we'll be guiding you throughout this webinar. Welcome all. First of all, before we start talking and discussing in depth on these different business model types and how launch plays out on this, some small logistics of this webinar. First of all, if you have any questions, and we like to have questions, obviously, send them in through the chat box. We will try to answer them during the Q&A at the end of this webinar, where the panel comes back and can discuss on your questions. Second, the webinar will be recorded. You can find the recording then on our website, the launch website. By the way, also on the launch website, you can find all kinds of launch materials developed for scaling the aggregation of sustainable energy assets. So there you can find lots of materials, lots of communication materials, but also standardized materials for helping you to do so. And third of all, slides will be sent to everybody registered for this webinar. So you can look back afterwards and see some details that you perhaps missed during the presentation. Right? So for quite a lot of people, I don't have to introduce launch anymore. But perhaps for some that would like to know what we're aiming for, well, launch, the project launch aims to accelerate the deal closure and pipeline growth for sustainable energy assets through standardized materials. This includes investor-grade flexible contracts. More on that in this webinar today. It also includes standardized risk assessment protocols for investors, a roadmap for project developers to access growth capital, and also market-tested value propositions for project developers and clients. So I'm really thrilled today to have this very nice lineup of people, of experts and thought leaders from the field. We have with us Alex, Managing Director of EnerSafe Capital. We have John O'Rourke, CEO of New Energy Group. And we have also on board Casper's CEO and founder of RCG Lighthouse. They all will share their experiences and their practices from the trenches, be it in contracting, be it with their sales strategies, be it with their entrepreneurial ventures in the field. We have an agenda, but we're going flexible about that. We hear each of the three speakers discuss the impact contract modeling can have on your project development sales strategy, or vice versa. Alex will talk more in detail on the different business model types and how the launch approach comes in as a pragmatic solution for many projects. John will take us in more detail on his experiences from the sales trenches and how his sales strategy plays out towards the contracting model. And Caspers will share experiences on his entrepreneurial endeavors with respect to service-driven and performance-related approaches to the market. As already stated, the Q&A, please, we will do that in the end after the presentations. If you have any questions popping up during the presentations, just put them in the chat and we'll try to cover them in the end. So thanks again for joining us for this webinar. Thank you for listening in. And now handing over the floor to Alex for giving us some more insights into the different types of ESCO business models. Alex, the floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Bart, for the introduction. As mentioned before to my colleagues, and I'm going to mention also to the attendees, unfortunately, I'm going to cut my camera. I know it would have been helpful to see my face while presenting, but I don't want to have any technical glitches. So apologies for that in advance, and I'm going to dive in now into the presentation. As Bart mentioned, I mean, the purpose of this webinar is to try to understand how do the different model contracting it's affecting the sales approach. And in order to get to the core of this topic, as a first step, we started by analyzing and presenting the different ESCO business models and the core categories, and clearly by making a parallel between them, as that is the first proper step. We have identified, as I think everybody knows by now, the two big categories, and we're talking about energy performance contracting and energy service contracting. The energy performance contracting, it is divided into two big categories, which is the guaranteed saving models and then the shared saving models. The difference between them, it is, I mean, both of them, they are implementing energy saving measures with ongoing monitoring and verification services. The difference between guaranteed saving models and share saving models is that one is to provide the cost savings that is associated to overall energy utility bills, and that is the shared saving models, and the guaranteed saving models is to provide the guaranteed energy savings. In the case of the energy saving contracting, we are talking about, in general, the classical definition is that it's an efficient supply of useful physical outputs such as lighting, heating, cooling, and it's contracted on a subscription basis. It's measured and delivered in physical units. What we have identified here are the main differences that might influence or will actually influence and have an impact on the sales strategy. So the type of technologies, the fee structure, the accounting approach, and the type of financing and who's accessing the financing is going to define let's say, the direction that an ESCO might take in approaching their end client. And what we mean by this is, for example, and just taking the accounting approach, if your end client would like to have an off or on balance sheet approach, is going to direct a little bit the approach that you're going to take. So if it's important or it's not important for your end client might have an impact on the way that you're going to pick your business model. And in terms of type of financing and who's accessing it, that has an influence on sorry guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Alex.
Okay, Gar, sorry. You froze a little bit there for a second. I didn't know if you can still hear me. Yeah, so the type of financing and who's accessing the financing is it's again rather different when we're talking about the energy performance contract and energy saving contracting. In the case of the guaranteed saving model of the EPC, the person that is usually taking the loan is the client, which automatically is going to put the contract on balance sheet. So the client is usually taking a loan from a bank, and then it's making the payment, it's making the ESCO, it's implementing the project, and this is the basic structure of the financing of this particular contract model. In the case of the shared saving models, and also in the case of energy saving contract, we have an overlap here. Actually, the ESCO or the as a service provider is the one that is going to take the loan on board, so it's taking the financial risk, and it might take a loan from a bank or private equity from investors, and that is how they're going to finance their project and deliver the project to the end client. Another difference it's between these two main categories, so between the EPC and the energy as a service, is the fee structure. This also has impact on an on-balance and off-balance sheet aspect, as we very well know. In the case of the guaranteed saving models, the payment is derived of the energy savings that are achieved, and in the case of the shared saving models of the EPC, the payments are linked to achieved savings in energy consumptions that are usually linked, as mentioned before, to utility bills. In the case of the energy saving contract, the payments are fixed. so are predictable, usually are fixed, and normally without they are not linked to an energy performance requirement. But however, the payments are linked to the performance of the agreed service levels, because you have to have a subscription and you have to deliver a certain service within some parameters. What I do need to mention here is that in the case of the energy saving, in the case of the EPC, regardless if it's a guaranteed saving model or a shared saving models, that the ongoing payments are intended to be less than the financial savings realized in the project, which means that whatever you're going to pay to the ESCO, it needs to be covered by the savings. This, for example, in the case of shared saving, in the case of the shared saving models, is going to have a direct impact on your on-balance or off-balance sheet accounting treatment. Why? Because if you can't cover it from the savings, all of a sudden it becomes a liability. If you can cover it from the savings, then it's considered to be off-balance sheet based on the Eurostat rules. And there, I'm sure that everybody that is dealing with public clients, they know very well, they are rather familiar with the Eurostat rules and their approach when it comes to what is on and off balance sheet. In the case of the energy savings service contracting, we do have the on balance sheet and off balance sheet possibility, and that is related to it's related, as mentioned, to the payment schedule and also to the length and the size, into financial size of the transaction. So if it's beyond a certain amount, it might go on balance sheet if the payments are not variable but simply fixed. So this is like a parallel in between the two categories of ESCO business models, and clearly it's very difficult to, by looking at them, just to choose one of them, and I think that what is very important to understand is that for a single company it's almost impossible to apply the both of them, both business models, because it takes a lot of know-how and also a lot of education on the end client side. As I'm sure that Kaspar is going to tell us later on, based on his experience, some clients might be more familiar with a particular type of contract, like for example in the private sector, as a service contracting is the mainstream, and now everybody knows a little bit about it and they're rather comfortable with it. But the classic EPC, regardless of whatever model we're talking about, it's mainly known rather in detail by the public sector, as it was, I think, mainly constructed for the public sector, so they can apply the simple and the complex measures. And the single measures are targeted usually for the private sector because they're easy to handle. So we're talking about lighting, cooling, they're easy to understand. And at the same time, from a company perspective, they can understand the fact that there's no point in investing a lot of their own capital into services that can actually be outsourced and maintained and verified by other companies, whilst they can invest their money into growing their business. So from this point of view, when we approached this topic within the launch project, I think we tried to be a bit more pragmatic and to start from an end client perspective and the needs of an end client when we devised the launch contract. And to thank you for changing the slide, Bart. And actually, this was the conclusion, that is not the business that should fit the contract, but it is the contract that should fit the business. And by making your contract fit the business and the needs of your end client, the pool of the end clients that you can reach is a lot larger than just by having a very rigid business contract that might not fit all clients. And I think that this is what we have achieved and we tried to achieve within launch, and hopefully we managed to achieve, is to give this flexibility to our ESCOs and to be able to reach more clients and to come and provide the needs to be the end client needs to be satisfied. And with this, I'm just going to give my word to my colleague, John, from New Energy Group, who is going to take you further in the launch contract model and the impact on the sales process and the screening of clients and so forth. John?
Yeah, thanks, Alex, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's conversation. I guess to begin with, I'd like to walk through that first conversation with the customer, because just from my own experience, it's the most crucial in that it can set the tone with the customer and early on clarify the value proposition, and it ultimately, steers the development process and the schedule for the project developer and indeed the customer. And I guess, from my perspective again, the first question for me is typically why? Why do you want to do this now? Why maybe have you not done it before? When are you planning on doing it? And for that matter, do you have a budget? And if not, how do you intend to pay for it? So at this stage of the customer engagement process, I'm probing for what level of commitment and which customer decision drivers, so that I can, at this stage, I'm trying to align what I'm hearing the customer's wants and needs to be with not just the right technical solution, but ultimately the right commercial contract vehicle for their facility. I'm trying to understand the motivation for wanting to do the work. Is the equipment at end of life? Is he or she looking to introduce new and better technology or control strategies? Is the motivation operating expense reduction? Or is it, the latest carbon abatement and reporting initiative that's a corporate initiative inside maybe their facility? Or is it just plain old infrastructure renewal and upgrade? Of course, all of the above is the answer you love to hear. However, 2 out of 3 or 4 is fine too. And most importantly, these answers help to refine the ultimate value prop and the contract vehicle that's used to implement the project and ultimately steer it in the right direction from the get-go. As both contract vehicles include a third-party investor or a bank, right? These questions also help to shape investor understanding, while starting the discussion on financial and technology constraints that may need to be considered. Is it a single measure or is it a multi-measure project? This could ultimately direct the contract vehicle choice, or if return on investment is the primary driver, maybe a shared or guaranteed saving structure is preferable. Is balance sheet treatment a consideration, or do we even care? If so, what accounting rules apply, and does the contract vehicle choice support those rules? What risks are we asking all parties to consider, and can they be quantified? And if not, how long will it take to quantify them? How much effort will be required? And ultimately what we're searching for is, are the appropriate risks with the right parties? So this level of effort that's really spent up front can significantly influence deal pricing, structure, transparency, and ultimately success in closing. And it also guarantees that the right conversation is being had with the right people at the appropriate time in the deal development process. So that means no surprises down the road. So the design of the launch contract is such that developers now have the flexibility in the contract to navigate the sales and development process with a standard contract document that is already used and accepted by investors and can easily be modified in the annex schedules to capture, the many deal nuances that we run into without having to engage further legal costs and charges, which are one-time in nature and can be very expensive, and depending on the size of the deal, can ultimately kill the deal. So to understand how the contract modeling and design can affect your sales strategy, we really need to revisit, some of the core pillars of the sales process and execution as it relates to these two business models. Having a standardized contract, as great as it is, it won't sell the job for you. We have covered off the decision and scope questions, and based on the client answers, have begun now to formulate the value prop. It's now time to clarify who needs to play a role in supporting the decision, and establish what stage of the process the customer is really at. And as well, clarify what factors need to be managed in order to shape the final strategy and get everyone on board. Which takes us to the next slide and to the heart of the sales process that incorporates all the necessary players in making an investment decision in their infrastructure. If it's a simple lighting or on-site clean power initiative, then one might entertain as a service level contract with little technical evaluation required, but oftentimes much more detailed financial payment and legal evaluation. That will, what that tells you really is the methodology and the process in which you navigate the different stakeholders, whether they're external stakeholders, as in banks or investors, or inside the client organization. As opposed to a more comprehensive project where technical assumptions and considerations directly underpin the cash flows and financial performance of the project, and therefore require an in-depth technical risk analysis where a shared or guaranteed savings model might be a more welcome approach. But either way, we still need to explore, design, and validate the project. Plan our engagement strategy to ask the right questions and really listen attentively to our customer along the way. So just for example, a national school principal approached me with a request to change their lighting as it was old and no longer fit for purpose. So we conducted the audit, did the pre-construction review in order to calculate the savings and estimate the project cost. Now, what I learned was that school principals are really busy folks. So keeping the deal process moving was challenging. When asked, why are you only doing this now? The response was, we haven't had the money and we've been chipping away at other facility issues which were more important for us at the time, like a leaking roof or the boiler blowing up. The school depends on government subsidies and funding for all of its capital and maintenance activities. The principal had received a marketing flyer offering lighting as a service in the mail. Her motivation was, I need better lighting for my staff and students, but I just don't have the money to pay for it. Slam dunk is what I'm thinking to myself when I hear this. And so I immediately jumped to the conclusion that I can stop the sales process. There's no need to work the normal process here, as the principal has clearly already made up her mind, and I'm her guy. So had I been disciplined early on, I would have discovered that the principal was not ultimately the decision maker, but rather the implementer of the solution. 7 months and 4 site trips later, including a sample classroom installation to demonstrate and validate the technology selection, I received a call from the principal saying there is a new board member that has been assigned to review the decision that I've already made. You all know what happens next. What is this? Why does it seem so expensive? What is all this light as a service stuff? I've never seen this anywhere else. I'm a professional in the construction sector and I need to carefully review this and have a contractor buddy give me a check bid and review what it is you have done out at my school. Big takeaway was, had I presented the contractor or the contract earlier in the deal, I would have avoided all of this and a lot of the unnecessary cost outlay and captured all of the decision makers and addressed their concern right up front. My go, no go would have cost me $10 as opposed to $10,000. The launch hybrid contract really does provide clarity around the concepts. But more importantly, it also provides for a common language for all stakeholders, because you know, a lot of these people, they don't have the jargon that we've managed to develop, you know, inside the industry over the last few years. And by providing a common language that they understand, this really does help to facilitate successful engagement by the customer, the project developer, and the investor in a much more timely and efficient manner. So being disciplined with your sales process and carefully explaining the contract at the onset of the deal will deliver better results, in my experience, each and every time. The contract will help to surface the business issues that need to be raised and discussed early on in the sales process. It will also dictate the engagement process and deal development schedule, and really afford customers a true understanding of the deal, really thereby boosting, you know, their confidence among their peers when seeking to gain approval internally and externally. So this hybrid contract is really should be fully integrated into your sales process and your deal development. And in fact, by presenting the contract up front, it often allows the business development folks to like overcome, you know, their fear about asking the hard questions, as in presenting the contract so that they have the questions answered, and immediately their level of confidence in building that relationship and ultimately closing that deal with that customer is raised. So finally, I guess, you know, another very, very important component here is that, look, when it's time to fund, there's no mystery or surprise. Investors are familiar with the contractual benefits and features inside this contract, and provided the solution, of course, can perform as advertised, your project will be funded. And this really is the aim of the launch contract design, is to provide a document that really can bridge the customer with the developer and the investor in a very cost-effective and efficient way. So with that, look, I'd like to hand it back to Alex, you know, who is going to follow up on to discuss a little more about the benefits and the features of this hybrid model. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So as very well and very articulately John already pointed out the benefits of the launch contract. Indeed, this hybrid model, within the hybrid model, we try to take the best out of the both worlds. We try to give you the ability to ask us to pick and choose the elements from a performance-driven contract and also service-driven contract for the maximum flexibility to be able to answer your end client's needs. It is standard because we have the main body of the contract, which is always the same, and those aspects remain standard, so it can serve the bundling purpose, right? So investors can invest in your projects and then reach scalability, which is one of the issues of the market, that the scale is very difficult to reach. And then it also is it eases the way of doing business. Why? Because for the ESCO and for the end client, as it always remains the same. So even if you need to let's say you have a client that has multiple properties or multiple warehouses where they can have and become benefit of your services. It's a lot easier when they already know the contract. It's standard. It's just the flexible part that can change, and it can go in the payment schedule and so forth. It is flexible because key elements of the standard contract can be adapted. So our 7 schedules of the contract can be adapted. So the payment schedule, how you're planning it, the risk appetite that the ESCO has in this case, the accountable treatment, how important is it for your end client? It's flexible, so it can be defined as best as to suit the ESCO's business model, but also the need of the end client. And I think that this is one of the main say qualities of the contract, the fact that it combines and it gives you flexibility, and you can reach more a pool of larger clients and make sure that you're also comfortable and they're also comfortable with the contract. And it is hybrid because we call it hybrid, and it is hybrid because clearly I think on the market to find a pure academic EPC or as a service is rather difficult. The market is it's organic. One needs to adapt their business model and needs to pick the elements that fit best your business model and your targeted end clients, right? So this is why we call it a hybrid, because you need a combination of the different mechanisms that are particular to the as a service or to the EPC, and we indeed try to cover as much as possible. And these are the elements that you can see on the slides. These are also the elements that are important, as John very rightly mentioned, in a triangular from a triangular perspective, from the investor, from the ESCO, and from the end client. These are usually the questions and the sticky points when we're talking about contracting, also on the investor side and also on the ESCO side and end client side. And this is why we think that indeed this hybrid business model and the launch contract can be a real avenue on the ESCO side. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to give the word to Kaspars Osis, who is the founder and CEO of Lighthouse. He's going to dive into, I think, a very hands-on electricity as a service example, and give more details about the practicality of it. Kaspars?
Thanks, Alex, and hello, everyone. Good to be here. And I wish launch project was launched earlier because we would have saved a lot of time. We wouldn't have to work on our own contract and build everything from the scratch. So for everybody starting just now, I fully support this and go for all the materials and try to adopt the best practice there is in Europe. But to begin with, so I'm Kaspars. I'm CEO and co-founder of Electricity as a Service company. We started off with lighting as a service back in the day. We were able to raise equity, get things going, and by now we have done more than 350 projects, primarily in private sector, which is retail, manufacturing, and warehousing. And as of late, we are very active also in public street lighting, which is the public sector. I would raise a rhetorical question early on about competitive advantages that ESCO should have in order to win deals, because whenever there's a negotiation between ESCO and customer, customer always has a choice to do it themselves, as John was really pointing out in the school example. And therefore, you should really think hard about what are the competitive advantages that you can present and put on the table, so to speak, in order to win the deal and make sure that you are sustainable. And in our particular example for lighting, that's internal LED know-how, where we do a lot of testing and we can reach efficiency level which is higher than the average market. But if we move on to, let's say, the basic principle of as a service or energy performance contracting, then I would draw attention to the total cost of ownership concept, because that's essentially what you as an ESCO is trying to sell. Because whenever it comes down to just pure technology and interest rate, usually you are just losing the game, because customers would have access to cheaper interest rate, be it private large multinationals or public sector customers, which can go to state treasury and get a negative interest rate. And unless you can deliver way higher efficiency than they themselves, there's nothing much to talk about. And when it comes to new technologies, be it LED lighting or photovoltaics, which of course is no longer new, but majority of customers are still having limited knowledge, then this is something where you should be thinking how to really be able to defend your additional knowledge or implementation experience or whatever it could be as an ESCO service provider. Moving next to the model as such, then I must say that we chose a hybrid model in the sense that we do share the savings. So that's very important in order to leave tangible value from day one. But we also do the service part in the sense that we are delivering particular output, be it generation output or the lighting output for the given technology. And probably since ESCO is usually in between the financiers and the customer, then we understood this from early days, that on one hand, you should make your financiers comfortable. So that's where you are trying to basically minimize the risks, be it operational or financial or whatever other risks which are within the duration of the contract. But primarily you should be focused on the customer needs, so that you can beat this scenario when they decide to do it themselves. So therefore you should be most likely taking all the risks and trying to make sure that the share of savings that you are leaving from day one is big enough to discourage this alternative scenario, which is doing it yourself. And maybe the last comment on this, the longer the debt period, the more savings can be left for the customer from day one. And our approach is that we set the price floor or the minimum payment that the customer is paying on monthly basis in order to limit the worst case scenario for debt providers. And then we are sharing the savings which arrive due to the technology change, be it lighting or solar. And if we move on to the tangible value that comes out of technological shift, then if it's private sector, usually discussion comes down to the money part. So that should be the primary driver. I've been always confused about guaranteed energy performance because energy performance as such is not translating into pure money. Money comes when you multiply it by the electricity price or the energy price, and of course that part can fluctuate a long time. So you must make sure who is the one taking the electricity price risk. But lately, of course, with all the green movement and everything else, there are other arguments which come into play, such as transitioning to new technology as such. We've seen increasing number of customers which are willing just to show off, so to speak, to your neighbor that you do have the latest technology and you didn't pay a single euro for getting it into your location. Maintenance has to do with total cost of ownership, and this is something that ESCO companies should be able to defend. And the bigger the scale, the more positive effects you have on your sales process, and the more confidence it brings to other customers as you scale further. And last but not least, there has to be some kind of measurement and verification in place so that whatever gets sold also gets measured so that everything is transparent and understandable to all the parties involved, and result is really delivered. So that's pretty much the story I was willing to tell today. And before handing over to Bart, I would say that in energy efficiency, really time is money. So let's better act on making something happen rather than looking for better timing. So I think the time is now, and the question is, how do we scale it up at the European level so that this transition happens rather sooner than later. So thanks, and back to you, Bart.
Thanks a lot, Kaspars, Alex, and John, for sharing your experiences, for sharing your stories on how to put, let's say, a hybrid model, a flexible contract in the market, and how to tie that with a sales strategy that is delivering. And that's what we're hearing also. So it delivers the sales strategy, it grows your pipeline, and in the end, that's obviously the goal, to scale it up. We have different perspectives here talking about these approaches, these different types of business models, and how to approach it flexibly. I would say I'll open the floor to questions from the audience. I can look to the chat for that, but I don't see many questions appearing there. Perhaps somebody would like to take the opportunity to raise a particular question he or she has top of mind based on one or more of the presentations. And nevertheless, you can still put it in the chats, and we can take it on a little bit down the road. We still have some time left, but up front, I also received a couple of questions from people asking to register and already sharing some thoughts there. So one particular question that popped up in the number of let's say discussions is the following, and I would like to let's say raise it to the audience, to the panel here. Is there a particular difference in approaching the private versus the public sector customers with this hybrid model? Perhaps I'm going to first put this one towards Casper's, and Alex, John, if you feel also to pull in here, please do so.
Well, there's definitely a difference, and it comes down to public procurement law, which we have in every country in Europe. So that's a different kind of process. So you can invest a lot of time trying to educate customers, and then it just comes down to the price at the very last minute, and you never know what's the outcome. In private sector, of course, you do have negotiation going on. So even if you are maybe losing to somebody, you can still do the final punch to win the deal. In public sector, it doesn't work like that, and that's a big question mark, and how to basically finance that long sales cycle, which also John raised in his presentation. So that's from our side.
Yeah. John, you want to jump?
Yeah.
Alex, you want to jump in here? Yeah.
What Kaspars was saying is that indeed also in our pool of pilots, and Bart, you know that very well because we've been working with quite a few of them. This is something that is always coming up, that indeed when you're dealing with the public sector, the sales cycle is a lot longer, and it takes a lot more time and more resources to seal the deal. And then pricing is always an issue, clearly, because it is a commercial agreement. And it's also, I think that in the latest couple of months, what we also received as a feedbacks from some of the ESCOs when they were dealing with the public sector is that they are very familiar indeed with the energy performance contract, not so familiar with the energy saving, energy as a service contract, but because they didn't have so many good experiences or positive experience with the energy performance contract, they're very willing to move a little bit towards the as a service type of approach, and they're very much willing to learn. So there is a learning curve on that side because they are not so familiar, but yeah, there is an openness that was not present a couple of years ago when they were much more familiar with the classic energy performance contract approach.
Okay, interesting to hear. John, you want to share some of your thoughts related to the differences between public and private sector potential customers approaching with this type of flexible contracting?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think on the private side, you know, depending on what type of customer it is, right? So you've got commercial real estate, you've got manufacturing, and you've got, you know, small institutional. They really all have different, you know, decision processes. But typically, I would completely agree with Casper's in that it's much easier on that side, just because there's a lot more flexibility and not a lot of bureaucracy. When you switch to the government side, now through no fault of the governments, I mean, it's bureaucratic by intention, right? But it's my experience is that you have probably no business trying to deliver energy performance contracting or as a service into a government agency that doesn't have an approved framework in place from which it can engage, simply because that, you know, the key issue in the government performance contracting arena is that, one, the powers to be think it's smart and want to do it. That's important. And number two is that you have a procurement design and model or framework in place, which will attract ESCOs in to deliver the products and services. Now, ironically, the government sector is probably the ideal candidate for what it is we have to offer, right? Because they're typically mission-based. They're going to be there for 15 to 20 years. You're going to be able to deliver lots of interesting technology and comprehensive solution sets to that end client. So they really are, it's a wonderful way to deliver a solution set into that sector. However, procurement, bureaucracy, commitment have got to be there. And in those parts of the world where you can check all three boxes, then you'll find that they have a thriving ESPC government market.
Yeah, thanks a lot, John, for also sharing your thoughts on this and making a couple of very interesting points as well, as with Casper's and Alex. And that brings me a little bit to my next question is, well, introducing this hybrid model and flexible contract approach is putting the end client central is one thing, but what would be the next step for you to really scale this up? What would be a couple of ideas there that we need to really make this happening in large scale? What would be some of your ideas here?
If I may start, then well, the biggest cost in the game is really the development cost. So John also mentioned the average sales cycle can last from like 6 to 24 months, and it can be years for, let's say, public customers. So somebody has to take this cost in order to arrive at a bright future when the deal is signed. Because when you do have a bunch of contracts for tens of million euros, it's easy to get them financed, right? You have plenty of options. You have commercial banks, development banks, like a full list of options. But in order to get there, you need to have short, flexible money. And I still wonder where will it come from, because it's not venture capital. They are in no way interested in scaling this up. There's a lot to do with hardware, meaning installing physical gadgets at the customer's end. And family offices, I think they are yet to get themselves involved in paving the way for whoever is willing to participate in this green transition. So it's an open question who will make the first move in really scaling this up at a serious level. Because everybody is talking about, let's say, green transition, the goals are set, we have to be neutral by 2050. International Energy Agency came out with a list of, I think, 200 activities that need to be done in the next few years, but somebody should be getting salary to get this done. So I wonder who is going to pay for it.
Those are a couple of still open questions sometimes, but indeed a couple of very interesting points that you raised there, Casper. To conclude, Alex, John, if you would like to share some thoughts there, Alex?
I mean, yeah, it's a rhetorical question. I think it's an open question, and yeah, unfortunately, I don't have an answer, and I don't think that anybody has an answer at this moment. Indeed, the project development cost, until you seal the deal, it's something that is very difficult to finance, right? Usually ESCOs are chipping in by themselves or going to their shareholders. At this moment in time, indeed, there is no financial facility that would do that. You would have, I mean, in some cases you have in countries, you know, they provide grants and they might cover that cost. However, as we very well know, that can distort a little bit the market, because it has there's a flip side effect when there are a lot of grants involved, and there's not the need of as a service, because they pay it from a grant. So then it is. Yeah, it is an issue on the market. I do believe that at an EU level and at a policy level, some changes should be made to enforce and to help the scalability of this particular field, especially because indeed one of the biggest policies that they are trying, one of the biggest projects that they're trying to do right now, it's the Green Deal, it's the climate mitigation and adaptation. These are the big topics. Lots of funds are coming in, the resilience recovery funds, again, on a loan and on a grant basis, which we don't know exactly how it's going to impact each country, each EU country. So yeah, it is an open question, and hopefully in the next couple of years we're going to have a bit of clarity of or some volunteers that would like to take that that cost on board from the financial side.
Yeah, okay, well, thanks a lot, everybody, all the speakers here, our thought leaders here, for sharing their experiences, their knowledge in this webinar. Thanks also to the audience for listening in. As I said, and as I mentioned, the recordings and the slides will be sent afterwards, after this webinar. If you would like to have some further details or further material, please also visit our website of Launch, or get into contact with one of us for sharing and discussing some of these materials on a hybrid model and a flexible approach towards addressing the market. Thanks a lot, everybody, for listening in. Hope you enjoyed it, and see you also next time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.